Our theme this month is the dynamic laws of healing. And today's topic, step number 3, is be quiet and adjust. This month I've been focusing on how the concept of chemicalization is always present in the process of healing anything. The materials that I'm using come from the book Dynamic Laws of Healing by Reverend Catherine Ponder. For those of you who have been active in the Unity movement, Dr. Ponder's name is a familiar one to you. If it's not familiar to you, you can go online and discover that she has written a number of books over her many 92 years, and she still is writing, including a global newsletter that she circulates every month. In the talks earlier this month, I defined in detail what chemicalization means. It's a metaphysical term, and if that's a new word to you, metaphysical means beyond the physical. So if you didn't attend the service last week on the 15th, or the one preceding that on the 8th, you can obtain detailed information on chemicalization on our YouTube broadcasts when they're posted. But as I say, it's a metaphysical term, and from a scientific viewpoint, it might be likened to the process of alkali neutralizing acid. Now that's in the sciences. What does it have to do with your body? Well, here's the thing, since we have some new people in our audience this morning. Your mind and your body are connected. They don't operate independent of each other. But what's news to many of us when we first begin learning about metaphysics and science of mind is that the mind leads and the body follows, not the reverse. So what we're talking about here is cause, my thinking, affect my body. The other interesting thing about that is that the mind is actually more than the brain. Now, if you happen to be a brain surgeon, please bear with me while I walk you through this. But the fact of the matter is, the brain is an organ, it's a wonderful organ, it does fantastic things. The mind, however, exists not only in the brain, but in every cell of our bodies. Now, there was a time when metaphysicians said this and we were thought to be lunatics. But now science has proved that very thing, that contained within every cell of your body there is intelligence. And that's why a kidney cell always does what a kidney cell does. And a tongue cell always does what a tongue cell does, and so on down the line. And every cell within that organ or that system in the body knows its job and does its job because it has the intelligence to do that. And then each one of those organs or systems has the capability to talk to another organ or another cell which has another system which has different cells, and they are doing what they're supposed to do. Gallbladder cells do gallbladder things, and blood circulation does blood circulation things. And so the body is intelligent. And as the mind works, and we've been talking about mind, even though I sort of hid it behind the things that I've been saying here in terms of how things unfold for us. So did Arliss when she spoke of the weather. But the fact of the matter is that our thoughts, even when we are not conscious of them, which we aren't always, our thoughts impact what's happening in the rest of our self, and that includes our body. So thoughts are cause, and the body and its functions are effect. So when we talk about healing, and we talk about physical healing, we talk about mental and emotional healing, we talk about spiritual healing, it's all one process of healing. And the beauty of that is that each of us has control over that for ourselves. So it's important to remember that this process occurs in all those areas of our selfness, not just the physical ones. Because sometimes there's a belief that healing is unique to and specific to only physical illness or injuries. So this is a reminder that healing is just as present and powerful in those other areas of our life experiences as well. So this process that we've been talking about of chemicalization is exactly what's happening in our minds and our bodies when we begin to deliberately practice the dynamics of right thought. A chemical change actually takes place, literally takes place in our thoughts and in our feelings. Now the physical comes into it, the feelings, which is then reflected in our body and ultimately in the affairs of our life. You can see the chain as it works. What we talked about last week in the talk Shake and Break, which is step 2 in this 4-step chemicalization process of healing in Ponder's treatise on chemicalization. When we talked about shake and break, and I'll just give you a quick oversight of that, and then you can listen to the talk on YouTube. But it's when we decide to do something loftier in our mind and in our life, it doesn't necessarily mean a great, huge mental, physical, or theoretical change. It just means that there are things in our life that we would like to improve upon, perhaps to release and put something better in their place, or perhaps we want to learn a new skill. We want to have a new loving relationship. We're looking for work that challenges us and that matches our capabilities and our desires. So we begin to read up on that. We begin to learn new skills. We begin to do our spiritual practice around that. And when we talk about shake and break, what we're really talking about is things begin to do things that perhaps we weren't expecting. So consequently, what seems like I am making great progress in a new career or in a new relationship or in a new place that I'm going to live and enjoy, that instead of it looking really positive and everything all falling into place immediately, it looks worse because some things have to go away in order to make room for new things to come into our lives. So when we talked about shake and break last week, that's what we were talking about. That the phrase, sometimes things have to get worse before they get better, probably came from somebody who was practicing this and who didn't really understand that it's not getting worse, it's that I'm releasing the old things that no longer serve me. And sometimes when it comes time to let them go, there's a certain amount of grieving related to that. And yet I know that the new things that I'm bringing into my life more than replace it when I am willing to be patient and move through this. So that's what brought us to today's topic, be quiet and adjust. And this is when things get just as quiet as they have previously been loud when I was going through the shake and break and wondering how much more do I have to release before I can start to fill my coffers again with the beautiful new ideas and possibilities that are out there for me. So this period can be an apparent period of loss or failure. Ponder sometimes refers to it as the void, which is kind of a scary name, isn't it? But this is just a readjustment period, preparing for change. It's a quiet period, which by this time, after the shake and break, we kind of enjoy. It's like, I can take a deep breath. During this time, if there is seemingly some loss or change or readjustment as we let go of the old things that don't serve us anymore. Maybe those are relationships. Maybe that's work. Maybe that's a place that we live. Any of these things sooner or later come up in people's lives, don't they? I mean, this is the reality of living life. And yet, there is a way to transition from what no longer brings you joy and happiness into something new, something better, something broader that does bring you those feelings, those ideas, those thoughts. So during this time, we remember this great truth. When a right-thinking person seems to lose something, it's because his or her inner self is clearing the way for something better. You see, this is the beauty of the mind. My mind and God's mind are one mind. And the only time that's not true is when I shut that off, when I close that valve and don't listen. The rest of the time, the potential, the possibilities, the magnificence that this creative process that exists everywhere in the universe, in case you haven't already noticed, that it's actually within each one of us. It comes with the package. When we arrive here in this plane of existence, spiritual beings having this human experience, when we arrive here, we have all the tools with us. But sometimes we forget. Or sometimes we are bombarded by what's called the collective consciousness, which says, don't listen to that positive stuff. Get down here in the mud with the rest of us and live your life in misery. And far too often, we think that's the only alternative, when that is the least of the alternatives. And that's the one that's the easiest to let go of, because you are brilliant. Each one of you is brilliant in your own way. You bring special gifts with you on the way in. And when you leave, what we call transition, into your next level of consciousness, what has built here goes with you and then some, and yet it never leaves here, because your signature is on it in those you've been around. So when this is occurring, that your inner self is clearing the way for even better things, this is the time to remind yourself of this ancient truth. Ponder explains it this way. This is when the half-gods go, and God, the all-present, completely within you, God arrives in your consciousness. It's already in you. Never left, came with you, stays with you. And this is the time when we actually acknowledge that. What's that old saying? With God I can do anything. Why not? So Ponder assures us that if these periods of apparent loss, when you're going through this chemicalization process of letting go of the old and bringing in the new, that if these periods come to you after you've begun adopting success attitudes, this is merely a transition period from lesser to greater good. You see, we have to let go of the old in order to make room for the good. So she encourages us to meet that transition gracefully and expect great things to come from it. Why wouldn't you expect great things to come from it? Why start it if you don't expect that? So when you start it, expect that. Reject disappointment. Here's a biggie. Reject fear. And reject discouragement, because these only postpone your positive demonstrations. You see, when there's something deep within you, which actually we know to be our own purpose, because we all have our own purpose in being here, where we are not automatons, we don't all do the same thing, think the same thing, move the same way, and accomplish the same things. We are each individualized, and each one of us has a purpose for being here. So by all means, rather than trying to mimic someone else's purpose, allow your own. to shine through. And if one seeming blessing from your life leaves you, it may be that you've just become self-satisfied, and as a result, you've ceased to grow. You see, growing is what this is all about. Growing in consciousness, growing in knowledge and trust and faith that you are a deserving spiritual being having this physical experience. Now your very essence, as you move through this, is moving toward greater expansion, and that vacuum or that void just had to be formed in order to make room for that expansion. So it's not a bad thing, it's a transitional thing from the old to the new, this period of quiet adjustment in what we might refer to as the void. You might refer to as a waiting room, or as a possibility time that you're granting yourself, allowing yourself, being quiet, voluntarily stepping out of the old ruts, making room for new growth, further growth. Anything, any experience that causes you to grow is success, and it's healing taking place. And you know, I look out at the faces in the room, and some of you have so many years in front of you to do this. How we respect young people stepping into this kind of thinking, because that opens up such a panorama for them for such a long time in the future. For those of us who are a little longer in the tooth, you might want to pick up the pace a little bit so that you have every opportunity while you're still in this plane of existence, before you go on to whatever your next assignment is, to pick up all you can. I had a woman in my congregation in Porterville, California, who at age 92 was studying to become a prayer practitioner. And her friends and her family began to ask her why she was doing so much work at her advanced age. She was going to classes, she was doing homework, she was taking tests, she was driving her Jeep Cherokee all over town telling people about what she was doing. And people she had known for many years were a little curious. And they said, "Claudia, why are you doing all this at your advanced age?" And she said, "Well, here's how I see it." She said, "I believe that when we leave this plane of existence, we move on, forward and onward and upward into another level of consciousness. And I want to do everything I can possibly do to prepare for that before I leave." So for some of us, we still have some years to 92. For some of us, we have a lot of years to 92, but in the meantime, making these joyous, peaceful, productive years at no one else's expense, why not? I mean, I can't think of any reason why not to. So, your soul, what we call your essence, is always reaching out, reaching forward for greater growth and greater good. Sometimes it's really hard to ignore it. Sometimes it gets just downright antsy about the fact that we're not growing and expanding. So what you need to know is that as that desire to know more, to do more, to have more, to be more becomes more evident in your thinking, something has dropped away from you in order to make room for the bigger blessings that are in that very moment on their way to you. And this is why it's so important to be quiet, peaceful, calm during this transition period. This encourages us and enables us to adjust to observing and accepting the new. Intentions, desires, comfort, growth, good, dreams. Spiritual mind treatment, or affirmative prayer, as we talked about earlier, And affirmations, which are short affirmative prayers, maybe one sentence that is very compressed into your intention. Very important during this time. Perhaps even some spiritual counseling as well. Keep you on the path. Here's one of Reverend Ponder's suggestions to tell yourself. I give thanks for divine fulfillment, which is now taking place. Greater good is on the way. My heart's desires are now being realized and fulfilled. That's just something you can put that on the mirror in your bathroom. You can lay that on the passenger seat beside you so that when you stop at a stoplight or in traffic, you can glance over and read that and remind yourself of the value of it and the power of it. And in this process, simply letting go of any beliefs, ideas, or fears that you're losing anything. This is all about accentuating the positive and eliminating the negative. And some of you will remember that phrase from a piece of music long, long ago. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, accentuating the positive and eliminating the negative still makes sense. Anything that seems to have been taken from you can only show up in bigger, better, more positive ways, that it's divinely restored. Ponder calls that the new and the better. And during this transition period, as you're unfolding, it's taking place in your life, you confidently declare, all is well. All is well. And believe that. You know, the more you say it, the more you're tempted to believe it. And first it becomes building your faith on all is well. And then it becomes trust that all is well. And if someone asks you, someone who knows you well, a friend, a relative, asks you, what's going on in your life with all these changes? Your answer is, all is well. And then resist the temptation to elaborate on that. Sometimes we just really want to drop into explanation mode. And what that does is that garners interaction, criticism, suggestions, coaching. You've got enough on your plate to deal with it on your own. So all is well, thanks for caring. And then repeat to yourself, I let go of what goes. Now see, there's a difference between what goes and letting go of what goes. Sometimes things leave your life and you're still hooked to them in some way. And usually it's not for a positive reason. So once I decide to let go of something, someone, some idea, some out-of-date action, let it go. Divine restoration and divine fulfillment is now taking place. Know that as you are guided and hold to these healing attitudes, you're being richly rewarded. The necessity for keeping quiet about all this is happening to you during this period because your consciousness is like that of any newborn child. It needs to be quietly protected so that it can grow strong in your new understanding. After a while, rest assured, you begin to feel in control of your world again. A divine pattern for your new good begins to unfold to you. Suddenly you can see why it has all been necessary, and you joyously look forward to step 4 in this healing process called chemicalization. So, because of the time, I'm going to skip ahead and leave a part of today's talk out and work it into next week's. But I want to share this particular thing with you because it's so germane to what I've been talking about. And this is the power of the story. Those of you who live in Hawaii know the power of talk story, the enjoyment of talk story, And those of you who come to visit us, find ways to hear the locals talk story. And those of you who know me know I love to tell stories. Either my own or some of the really impressive stories others have told in order to make a point. I do this in my talks. I do this in my classes. I do this in my counseling. I even took a class in storytelling when I was in college. I thought I was taking it because it was one of those easy classes you could take and get credits for. And I've used it so much in my ministry, the background of storytelling, that who knew at age 19 that I would be using it for so many years to come. But I believe in the power of story, especially when it represents a real life experience and or the thoughts of great minds expressing. So here's a true story told by a real person about real people. In his book, The Art of Being, Dennis Merritt Jones tells this story, which is titled, Express Thyself. He said in his lean days as a musician and a college student, one of the ways that he could earn money was to teach music lessons. His students ranged in age from 8 to 82 or more years of age, and their levels of natural talent were often very high. What he found the most frustrating about teaching was that in many cases he was able to recognize their talent, but they could not or would not recognize it in themselves. Ever known anybody like that? You ever been anybody like that? After a few months of lessons, some of them would just throw in the towel and quit. And Dennis knew that for some of them, it was their own fear that held them back. Because at some level they knew that if their music started sounding too good, then they would have to do something with it. Dennis said he held recitals every 6 months, and inevitably that would flush some of them out of contact because of their lack of comfort zone. He said he saw so much talent and potential choked back by fear and uncertainty. Henry David Thoreau wrote this: "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them." The song of which Henry David Thoreau refers to here is the unexpressed self, God's creative essence, looking for an outlet through each one of us. What Dennis learned from his students, and he said, and from the pursuit of his own career as a writer and a performer, was that it takes courage to sing our song. That courage may indeed take us to the very edge of our comfort zone, that dark place called fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, even fear of success. Can you believe that? Fear of success. In fact, the only thing worse than failing is succeeding and not feeling worthy of success. And when that happens, we inevitably find some way to undermine our success. Fear of failure and rejection, on the other hand, seems to be an issue or an attachment we have the opportunity to heal if we're going to be fully expressed in bringing the gift of who we are to life. It's like, oh my God, what will I do if they don't like my song? Here's an idea. Get over it. You're singing your song for you, not for them, whoever them is. Your song may not be music at all, but it will be something that gives greater expression to your divine nature. to the divinity of God that flows through you all the time. Sing your song for all you're worth. That having been said, next week's talk will be on step 4, the final in chemicalization, and it's titled, This Stuff Works. And so it is.